Yes, hello, my name is Fred Salmon Ojai from Edukea Tanzania. I'm an H2 teacher of advanced level, so welcome this session to proceed with our topic threat to the world peace and after Second World War. So in the last session we ended on the definition of NATO, North Atlantic Organization Treaty and the Warsaw Pact in the year when they were formed. So now we are going to see how did the Warsaw Pact and NATO intensified Cold War. The first reason was through forming spy networks. It means those military alliances formed in international or spy networks. For example, NATO used the Central Intelligence Agency and the Federal Bureau Intelligence, CIA and FBI used by NATO, and Israel used the Mossad to be used in spying activities to contain spread of communism. On the other hand, Warsaw Pact used the KGB, COM and the CIB. So these were spy networks which were introduced by respective military alliances. One NATO and other alliance were Warsaw Pact. The another way on which Warsaw Pact NATO intensified the Cold War through intensifying arms races. It means that those military alliances intensified the Cold War in the production of arms races. For example, USA led to the manufacturing and developing of dangerous weapon production, like during the Manhattan Project, when the deadly weapons or atomic bombs which used in the destruction of two provinces in Japan, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, was the product of arms race or production of massive destructive weapons by USA. So on other ends, USSR introduced or developed the intercontinental ballistic missiles or ballistic missiles, intercontinental ballistic missiles, which were established by USSR as the response towards the USA. Another was through oiling international terrorism. It means that those Warsaw Pact and the NATO was supporting international terrorists, whereby those terrorists were assassinating the influential leaders, supporting against the ideologies. For example, the assassination of Indira Gandhi of India and the Samora Mike in Mozambique were assassinated by who hated communists. It means those leaders, Indira Gandhi and Samora Michael, were assassinated by those who had hated with communist or socialist ideologies. Another was establishment of military bases. It means those military alliances which were established by USA on NATO and USSR by Warsaw Pact were formed military alliances in different nations. For example, USA introduced the military bases in Kenya, South Africa and other areas, while USSR introduced the military bases in Cuba, in Poland and other nations. So these were the result of the way how Warsaw Pact NATO intensified Cold War. Another was through supporting actual war, for example, Korean War. So this Warsaw Pact and the NATO were intensifying Cold War through supporting the actual war. For example, South Korea was supported by USA and North Korea was supported by USSR. So during the Korean War, those two blocs, or those two military alliances of which were belonging to each bloc, NATO to USA and Warsaw Pact to USSR, were supporting those sites in Korea during Korean War of 1951 up to 1953. This was the ways on how Warsaw Pact and NATO intensified the Cold War. So let us see another threat to the world peace after the Second World War. This was nuclear arms race. What is nuclear arms race? Was a competition for supremacy in nuclear warfare between the USA and the USSR and their respective allies during the Cold War. It means that nuclear arms race was a competition of supremacy in warfare between the USA and the USSR and their respective allies during the Cold War. The first nuclear weapon was created by the Manhattan Project during the Second World War, and the USA was the first nation to use it in Japan. It means that the first nation to undergo the nuclear arms race or the production of nuclear weapons was USA, and when conducted the Manhattan Project, which costed $4.2 billion, and that weapons which were produced were firstly used by USA in Japan by bombing that areas in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So these were the example of nuclear arms race. Nuclear arms race. So let us see the causes of arms race. Causes of arms race or nuclear arms race. The Cold War existed between USA and the USSR. It means that the Cold War which existed between USA and the USSR intensified or led to the nuclear arms race. In which sense? In the sense that every bloc were competing on production of deadly weapons to make fear or to add fear to each or to other bloc. For example, the development of intercontinental ballistic missile by USSR led to the fear to USA, and USA decided to introduce and to establish intermediate ballistic missiles. So these were the competition in supremacy in nuclear warfare for each bloc. So another cause was the need to maintain balance of power among super nations. It means that the nuclear arms race or the production of nuclear weapons was due to those superpower, I mean USA and USSR, means USA and USSR wanted to maintain the balance of power. It means that they didn't want any bloc to dominate the other, so they insisted on competing in production of nuclear weapons, on how everyone will fear another, so and nothing will lead to make someone to dominate another. So this was this was another cause of arms race or production of nuclear weapons. Another was USSR expansionism policy. It means that the USSR expansionism policy led to the production of nuclear weapons or accelerated the arms race production. This means that USSR wanted to expand our territory. So this was encouraged USA to invest in the production of nuclear weapons to fear USA or to lay tension and panic to USSR. As USSR wanted to expand in Eastern Europe, in Poland, Bulgaria, Albania, and Slovakia, whereby USSR took over control there in those areas. So this was another cause of nuclear arms race or production of nuclear weapons. The fourth cause was technological advancement factor. It means that after 1945, the technological advancement was reached to its apex when the production of nuclear weapons took place, and the various nations were involving themselves in the production of deadly weapons. For example, USA during in the Manhattan Project, when they produced the deadly weapons that were dropped in Nagasaki and Hiroshima in Japan during the Second World War in 1941, after followed by the Pearl Harbor attack in USA, Hawaii. So these were the advancement in technological factor or in technological activities. And other countries like USSR was developed in manufacturing and development of nuclear weapons, as USSR produced intercontinental ballistic missiles. China was followed to produce nuclear weapons. India was followed, and other European and Asian nations were advanced in technological activities that led to nuclear arms race or production of dangerous weapons. Another was cheapness of weapons than troops. It means that those nations or superpowers believed that the use of troops were costly than the use of weapons. So that's why they kept themselves in the production of nuclear weapons. So you can see those countries as USSR insisted on the production of nuclear weapons for leading the fear and the tensions against their enemies. At the same, USA did it. That led to the arms race or nuclear arms race or production of nuclear weapons. And the last one was the mistrust between USSR and USA. You have to remember that during the Cold War, USA and USSR were not trusting each other. So what they did, they had decided to keep themselves in the production of nuclear weapons to prepare themselves that at any time, at any day, nuclear war could happen. So they prepared themselves against their enemy to ensure that when the war could happen, they will be ready to attack their enemies and be ready for war. These were the causes of arms race or nuclear arms race. Let us see the impacts of arms race. It led to the environmental destruction. This was through the testing of nuclear weapons in the oceans and in the deserts. For example, the nuclear weapons which tested by Russia in Kazakhstan and the Balapan, these were led to the environmental destruction, whereby the harmful gases were appeared or occurred in the air and led to the pollution of air, so that destroyed the environment. Another, it led to the prohibition of weapons. It means the arms race impacted on the prohibition of weapon production. It means that the UN decided to prohibit other nations and those blocs, USA and the USSR, to produce dangerous weapons because they were leading to the fear and tension among the world. So this was another impact of arms race. Another was led to the missile and the deaths. It means that the arms race or production of dangerous weapons led to the missile and the deaths to the people. For example, in Japan, in 1941, when USA developed the atomic bomb in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, almost 74,000 people were died in that event in Japan, and led to the different problems in the next generation due to that bomb which was bombed in Japan. And the last effect was it led to the establishment of military bases. It means the arms race or the production of dangerous weapons led to the establishment of military bases in different countries of the world. For example, the establishment of military bases by USA in Kenya, South Africa and other areas where USA had the interests in order to defend their interests in their respective countries. And USSR did the same in Poland, Cuba and other areas where USSR had the interest to ensure that the enemy or the hostile bloc do not enter in that area. So this is the end of the impact of arms race. Let us see an exercise, which is one question: explain the causes of arms race. Until there, this is the end of our lesson. So thank you for listening, and I welcome you in another session. Thank you.